And so they asked me if I'd say a few words. Because I'm really mechavev the Avi Ben, I didn't want to say no, so I said a few words. So what did I say? I said that once upon a time, and how much more so on Kaf Mar Heshvan, the Avi Ben by Abriz used to sign his boy into, you remember that? He used to sign his boy into Tom. And he even used to give money for schar limud. He would give money. He had a certain sum to pay into the kuppah of Tom that was the beginning of the schar limud for the boy. So I said, Kaf Mar Heshvan, halachas kama v'kama, darf mechad sein dem minui. So everybody should look around that. But anyway, that's what I said. Plus a couple of other small things. But anyway, the Nakuda is Kaf Mar Heshvan is connected with Tom Tmima. Because the whole, shleimus of the Ufta, the Rebbe Rashav's teachings, and this whole, status, Noirua, Vanifloa, Bezer Ho'inon, was even the founding of Yeshiva Tom Tmima. So they called the Talmidim, he called them Tmimim. So from that we see that the Ika Nakuda of the Yeshiva is Tmimim. Miller asks itself, what is the Inyan for Tmimis? What is the Nakuda of Tmimim? And it's Yedua that when the Rebbe first founded the Yeshiva, he didn't give it a name. It wasn't called Tom Tmimim, it was just called the Yeshiva. So it didn't have a name. And in the year, that was in Tov Nun Zayin. And in Tov Nun Tes, by the Akofis, the Rebbe gave the name to the Yeshiva. And how did it happen? Our Rebbeim from way back always used to get the first Akofa and the last Akofa. The same with the Rebbe. The Rebbe gets the first Akofa and the last. So the Rebbe got the last Akofa, and the Rebbe always used to say the Pesukim. So the Rebbe was walking with a Sefer Torah, and he came to Toimach Tmimim, or Yeshiyah. So all of a sudden the Rebbe said, Toimach Tmimim, and then he stopped. And he said, was for a Shaila, was Mirzal Rufen the Yeshiva? He said, what is the question? What we're going to call the Yeshiva? He said, the Yeshiva has Tomchei Tmimim. That's what he said. Well, he's holding the Sefer Torah, and he was halfway through the Pasuk, and he said, what's the question with that? And so certain people asked later, what's the Rosh Rabbi, Tomchei Tmimim? So he said, that means alle Anash, alle unsere Yidden, they're all going to support the Tmimim. So since they support the Tmimim, they're bound up with the Tmimim, they're with the Tmimim together. They're all one gush, they're all one people. And that's the Indian of Tomchei Rosh Rabbi, Tomchei Tmimim. The Choponim was sitting for Tmimim. So ask yourself the Shali, what's the Nakuda here in that? So it's like this, that we see two amazing nuances when I get to the yeshiva and the attitude of the founder, the Rebbe Rashav, to the yeshiva. In Tov Nun Zayin, he said that when he founded the yeshiva, he said the Ika Chiddush of the yeshiva is not that it's going to learn Gemara, Be'iyun, and there's other yeshivas that they also do that. The Ika Chiddush is that they're going to learn Siddur. In the Lubavitch, anyway, people learn Siddur. The Chiddush of the yeshiva is going to be that they're going to learn Siddur just like they learn Gemara. They're going to learn Be'iyun and Be'hasogeh, and it's going to come out in a Kavana Brura. What's it the meaning? What's it the Pshat? What's it in Pink to say in a Blat Gemara? That's how they're going to understand Chassidus. And he said, all right there, but that's going to be Nichnas L'Teich Avedis HaTshuva. And the other big off to it's going to be that there's going to be a big, how do you call it, emphasis on the union of how Siddhas comes out into Avodah Hashem. That was one of the inyanim, what he said several times in Torah and Zion. And then he said, the other way around, the pink to say you have to learn Siddhas like a Baal Nigla, you have to learn Nigla like a Baal Siddhas. Yes. When you learn Gemara, it's got to be recognizable on you that you're a Baal Siddhas. You're some of the Baal Siddhas. And that was the tremendous emphasis that came across the whole time. That you have to learn Siddhas. Benignus, purity process of the union, and Beribu Iyun and Beribu, how do you call it, Hasoge, Taki in Dominion, B'Shleiman. Then, all of a sudden, we see in Tov Reish Samach Beis, which was only 3 years after Nun Tes, when he gave the name of the yeshiva, there was this very famous sikha of Chayalei Beis Dovid. He had a very famous sikha. The Rebbe doesn't actually say Chayalei Beis Dovid, only towards the end of the sikha he mentions such a phrase. But the Rebbe took that sikha in such a, and the Rebbe made a whole new Rosh Tevis, a Chabad. From Chayalei Beis Dovid becomes Chabad. And the Rebbe said that was the kavanah of that sikha, was to make a whole new huge dimension in Chabad. That's Mizbatei in the Indian from Chayalei Beis Dovid. And what's the Indian from Chayalei Beis Dovid? What does he do this? And we see that in the sikha, what does he say? In the sikha, he brings a Gemara Masechta Ketzuvas, which says that whenever David HaMelech took soldiers out to the war, he was medactic that they should all write a get to their wives, al-Tanai. That's what's called a get al-Tanai. That if they didn't come back from the war, chas v'sholem, that the get was chal. So they wouldn't be a gunas, chas v'sholem. This was David HaMelech. So it's written in the Gemara, Kol ha'yoyter l'mochemes beis David, koisev get krisus le'ishtoi. That's the lashon of the Gemara. So the Rebbe said, Kol ha'yoyter l'mochemes beis David, that's the war of the generation we're facing. And Milchemes Beis David means the Milchem of Mashiach. And the Rebbe says clearly of that, the Rebbe Shah. He says that there's a war that Mashiach is fighting the whole time. And those are the Inya Shecherpu, Ikveis, Mishichecha. And he said there's some people who take the war so far that they're even Mecharef Mashiach. They're even Rahman and Islam. That he could attack Mashiach and try to belittle him and so on. But the war is to fight Mashiach's war. As he stated in the Sefer. And the Rebbe's Maramas, that's what the Rambam says, it's always appealed by the Yilomdim, what's it, this Milchemes Hashem? What is it exactly? Al-Hoponim, as he stated in the Sikha, and Koisev get krisos the Ishtoi in Ruchnias means that you gotta, once again, don't tell this to the wife. That's that last thing I need around here. So, what it means is, we don't mean Cholila that you have to go over and write a get krisos. What it means is that all the sort of connection with the world, of being bound up to the world, and that's put hidden in the word Ishtoi. For that you've got to write a get krisos. And it doesn't mean that you have to the whole time live in it. You've got to have it all tonight. You've got to be ready at any moment to completely cut them. That's the mashmoas of the Sikha. And then he goes on to say that that's the infant Mesiras Nefesh HaDorush B'Zmanenu B'Miyuchad, and Chayolim are people that they go into the war, and he's married in the whole marshal of a Chayal. But he doesn't ask him the question, he doesn't even know what the general wants of him. All he's told is you got to do kaf and kaf, took it the song, and he could, what? He's told kaf and kaf, that's it. That's the Teuchand of the Sikh. He said, that's another story altogether, the Sikhs in Topration on Zion. He said the whole in is to learn, to be even, and the whole in was on learning and Avodas HaTfilah, Abami HaLimud, and here we see a whole different ball game, a whole talking to Chayolim, and demanding clearly from the Tmimim, Mesiras Nefesh, and demanding that they be warlike people, and they've got to be ready to go everywhere and fight the war of Melech HaMashiach. As he stated, that's what's written there. That's another type of ball game. So the shot is, how do these two things come together? Wie kommt das hinein? So what I want to tell you guys is like this. There's a passage in Ein Beis, in the Hemshech Ein Beis, and if I'm not mistaken, it's in Sukkot, Topreish Ein Gimel, as they do something, in the Maimon von Sukkot. Domani, maybe it's in Shmini Atzeres, or maybe it's in Shabbos Brayson, but it's in that area. It's in that area. And over there, the Rebbe gets into this whole idea of Tmimah. And he said, what is the Midas of Tmimah? And so he says that there are certain people that they're Anshei Tmimim, Aish Tomim, Mitzad HaTeva. That's the way they are. They're born, but they don't ask questions, they don't go into chakiras, they're more answering ma'aser. But he said there can be at different levels. There can be certain people more tmimim, but ma'aser, certain people more tmimim. In midas, they would never feel anything. They wouldn't even dream of feeling anything bad. They're just tmimim in their midas. They would never hate anybody, chas v'shalom, anything like that. Because, they just tmimim by etzem birth. And then Tmimim b'machshava, they don't think bad things, they're just by nature. They think only positively and good about things. They look, at a high, they judge everything in a high way. He said, this is what he calls over there, Tibias Dika Frumkeit. That's what he calls it there. Tibias Dika Tmimim. It's from the Teva. And then he says, however, there's another form of Tmimas altogether. And he said, that other form of Tmimas, or that comes from after you've learned everything Sheyodcha, Maseges, but Pnimis HaTorah, but Derek Davke, Be'ivim Vasor, or Be'ikeh, there's Pnimis HaTorah. So יכול להיות, בנשומס מסוימס, אפילו von לימוד HaTorah הרוגil, if they really learn באמס לשמור, or Be'ikeh, it comes from לימוד Pnimis HaTorah, and after you learned as much as you can, you've been misamek and misyager, then you reach a point where you're prepared to be oilim into a tmimus. In other words, you don't forget what you learned, and you don't, just chas v'sholem say, well, I finished my work now I can move to something else. You take with you what you understood, but you move into another realm altogether, which is like tmimus, like it's, simplicity and thinking all you could and doing it. But he said then it's on another level altogether. And then it's in another level that it's able to conquer situations and take over the whole situation. And it can bring other people to Avodas Hashem and make them what you might call envious, and they want to be sho'ef. They would also like to be like that. So the Rebbe says that that's because the Pnimis HaTorah that you learn is feeding the Tmimah. And therefore the Tmimah is on a much higher level. It's like as if you've gone up through something and then you've come back. And you've lifted yourself into a simplicity. And that's the inner for Mesiras Nefesh. Immediate, it comes davke from somebody who knows Pnimis HaTorah. And he quotes it. In the inner for Nasogas Pnimis HaTorah, who Mesogel L'hagir L'Tmimus Amidi. That's what he says over there. As he stated. However, excuse me. I would like to do that 3 times over, but so how does it work the other way? We get is the other way. So the other way is that somebody who's already reached the infinite sanal, and who muchen b'kol rega lifoil b'kol inyonim b'terab shitas b'li hischashet b'shum maneya b'ikul. When he goes back to learn the Chassidus, it's another learning altogether. It's already in a different oimik and a different gishmak, and a different plane than what he learned before, in a good way. He learned before richtig. And doesn't even get that whole thing to get to the Tmimas. And now the Tmimas is brought in Yoni Shalpoil. He's actually been a Tomim Boiv because they're Popoil Mamish. But that then reflects back the other way. That then causes that when he goes back to his learning, he learns completely different. Gam B'Pnimis Atot. Alachas Gam B'Kam B'Nikla. It's another ball game altogether. And we see a most amazing, like, that he called fusion in Tomchei Tmim. The most amazing idea of Tmimis Habor Davkim Limud, which brings to the Iyam of Kibum and Sulas Nefesh, and then that, as it were, is mischaber back with the Iyam of your learning. Pnimis HaTorah, it elevates it into another level altogether. It's like an unbelievable combination, and a tzirut, the two inyonim, that they look to be opposite, but really they're all one inyan. But they elevated, and they brought out people that they were ready for anything. And if you look carefully, all the big Talmudim of Tomchei Tmim, Arishon, that the Rebbe founded in the bunch, all of them went out to difficult parts of Russia, and all of them became either Rabbonim, that they passed in the Logos, or they became Mashpiyim, or they became Shoichtim, or they became Malam. That was about it. Wasn't any other possibility. In other words, that they all became people that they affected the public life, or even Ikri. And the whole of Russia began to alter, at least Jewish Russia. It began to alter because of the effect of these guys that were called the Tmim Harshenim. That when they went out, and I didn't meet any of the Tmim Harshenim, but I met one or two of the Tmim later generations that they'd seen there of Russia. They were just amazing people, they were just something, Legamri, Mashracher. I once went into the house of Pinya Altes old Shom when I first came to Eretz, and he was the one who actually engineered my whole coming, Pinya Altes. There was a Sophia where I should come in there and come later, and he pushed I should come there. So anyway, he invited me into his house. So I came in, the whole thing was so strange to me. I walk up the stairs. He lived in a very modest little deer in King George Street. Okay. So I walk up, and there was somebody who was already waiting for him inside the house. Somebody had come to see him, and the resident told him that he was coming soon, so he was waiting. And who was it? This was a very famous personality, and he passed away just very shortly after this. His name was Rav Shaul Ber Zislin. Rav Shaul Doyev Zislin. He was one of the first mashpiyim in Tomchei Tmim. He was, when I say the first, put it this way, he was not from the Mamish first, but he was a bocher. He hadn't yet married. And the Rebbe said they should make him a mashpiyah. The Rebbe said, does name an akita, and there's a give him akita, and there's also a mashpiyah. He was such an amazing person. And he got to Eretz Yisrael, Mamish not long before he passed away, and he became a rob in a little shul in Tel Aviv, in a side shul, not a very well-known one, and they had just enough money from the Elias to pay him a small fee, and that's how he lived out his latter years of Zisla. He was an amazing person. He had this most amazing face. It's just, you could see the Gettelkeit on his face. So I walk into this room, coming up. First time I've ever been in the Dira. I come in, all of a sudden I see this person, I sort of, I pause from him. He was so impressive. The first thing he did, he runs over to me and he gives me a hug. He put his arms around me, hugged me up, and then he sort of, brought his beard close to my forehead and he gave me a kiss, a little kiss on the forehead. And then he shook my hand and everything, and he said, what's master, what's Hetzapati, and I don't even know the guy. I said, and he for sure doesn't know me. So afterwards, Rapini comes into the room, and everything's sort of quiet for a minute, and all of a sudden he thought I maybe didn't speak Yiddish. So he says to Pinion, he says, He said, by the way, who is this guy? So we see the amazing thing, the first thing is you meet another year. Yeah, and he looks like one of our photography, he looks like one of us. The first thing is, yeah, you hug him up, you give him a kiss and you shake his hand, you ask him, how's he doing? What's up? How are things going with you? And then you work out later who he is.
The Pasha, with the leather.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh. So he makes a very good point, Benno. Eliezer, the same thing with Rivka. He gave her all the jewels and everything. Then he said, oh, by the way, who are you?
Who are you?
So I was just so taken with that. And then later, I was there to talk with him about a couple of yonim in Chassidus, and he was so brilliant. He had such a beautiful way of saying things in this Yiddish that they used to speak in the old days. A most pure, beautiful, clear, succinct way of saying something. And he told me a whole little pirus in a mimer that I mentioned to him. And after that, very long after that, he passed away. So I wasn't there to know him, barichas, but I got to know him. And I got the whole picture of what these guys were like, what these two men were like. And on my way to the river, the first time I went, I stopped in Paris, and I met Reb Nissen. Now, Reb Nissen was a later, he was already a later generation. And I met Nissen, and the same thing happened. Mamish had thought about it. I got led into a room by Rabbi Yosef Goldberg, was his name. He was a Rosh Yeshiva in Brumwa. And I met him on the plane. And he insisted that I come out to his house. I had to wait a few hours. He said, no, you have to come to my house. So I come out, and I sort of leaned back in a big easy chair to sort of rest a little bit from the journey and everything. All of a sudden, a tallish person with a reddish beard, looked a bit sort of elderly, came into the room, and I put two and two together. I heard about the reddish beard. It was probably Reb Nissen. So all of a sudden I jumped out of the chair. I don't want to be laying in an easy chair when a person like Reb Nissen walks into the room. And later I had the same meaning with Reb Mendel. When I remember the first time I was laying on the sofa, and he came in. And he said, well, stay still. He said, what are you getting up for? He says, leave right over. He said, well, stay still from here. You're standing up for me. This is what I meant. So anyway, I jumped up. So he turns around, he sees me jump up out of the chair, Reb Nissen. He did the same thing. He walks up to me, gives me a big hug, and he shook my hand, and he said, how are you doing? What's that? So I said, I'm going to the rich. Oh, for zum Rebel. That's the way they used to say. For zum Rebel, well for dear. He said, good for you, And then all of a sudden he turns very sort of slyly to Rabbi Yosef Gold, and he says, he said, who is this person? Who is he? It's the same thing, absolutely. So that's what they were like, these Tmimim. They had Avos Yisrael, and they had the Inyam V'Toiv Amiti in their very beings. It was part of their whole makeup. That's the way they were. The Etzem Minyan. In other words, the Chassidus was part of their life in a way that it was down into the heel. Mamish Masha. And then I'll tell you that later I was Zeicher to go up to his room. He told me to come up to his house and he would spend a little time with me. I had a whole yechidus with Reb Nissen. I had a whole talk with him. Yeah. About 45 minutes I was sitting with him and talking. If we had time, I could tell you what we spoke about. But anyway, another time. It was the most amazing experience. And then we went down, we had to daven, it was already time to daven mincha, when the yeshiva daven mincha. And just to see how he daven mincha, that was an education. How he daven mincha. The shots had to wait for about 20 minutes till he finished the lesson. The Bochum just went ahead with their day, And all of a sudden, sort of the shots jumps up and goes, they almost do. And just the way he said, Korbonis, it was like, how do I would say Kornikle or something. Like he said, Korban. I'm not joking. He went up and he had a place where he done, and he stood and he put his face to the wall, and he started singing, It took him, the Bocher business, it took him sort of standing by the owner, waiting for him to put the kid by the study. By the time he got pieced up with the containers, and at that speed, it took a long time. And then the owner, Bakuya, he was covered in the voice. And then all of a sudden he's ready for Ashrei, so he sort of turns around, looks at the box, and Ashrei is So we have no idea. We have no idea what sort of world it was. And that was the Indian talking to me, that it worked in all directions. It was like a perfection. The limud produced tmimas of a new sort altogether, and that tmimas brought to Mesilas Nefesh, and that worked back the other way, that made your whole learning completely different. And it's like one amazing perfection. Well, what can I tell you guys?
How did the tmimas affect the limud Gemara? How did the tmimas affect the limud Gemara?
I'm not saying that when you learn the Gemara, you gotta be a Baal Chassidus. Yeah, in other words, a Baal Chassidus, not just somebody who knows it. It affects exactly how it affects. It's hard to describe. But well, maybe I'll give you something. I'll give you another. He asked a very good question. Not he, Mendel asked a very good question. So I say he just keeps carrying on. Somebody asks him a question. Carry on for another half an hour. So Mendel asked a very good question. And Mendel said, how is it that having Mesilas Nefesh makes you learn different? What does that mean?
That's the point.
I want to tell you guys.
The point he had, I don't know if you can measure how much more he had been being Siberian.
You've got to listen carefully to this story. I mean, you listen carefully to all the stories. So, what is it? When I first came to Kaf Mar, also in the same period that I met Shaul Ber Zishman, when I came to Kaf Mar, I had to go to visit a certain person. You shouldn't have told this next. But I had to go in to meet a person called Rom Yitzchok Glasman was his name. And he was like the Sgan Harod, he was like the deputy Rod. And he used to paskin all the shilas to give Rav Shneur Geralik, for some reason wasn't there or wasn't feeling well, or he'd gone away to a chasana or something. And some of the other shilas, to Kufa or wherever, they used to go and ask the shilas for him. But he was a big role. He had, Shmir, he had Dionis. He was a very amazing person. And he was a Shayid, the Takis, you could see him, he was a Chosid Tur, amazing. So he told me a story. Glasman. And he told me a story. Did you ever know Shalom Ber Glasman in Bnei Brak? He was his son. Anyway, he told me a story like this. And once again, you have to forgive, if it's a little bit arichas, forgive me, but I want to tell you the details. So what was it like this? That when he came to a certain age, he started to learn in Yeshiva Yerodei. He started to learn rabbinic studies, to use the expression. So he completed Yerodei, and then all of a sudden he gets a note from higher up that the Rebbe Rashab wants to see him for a minute. It was very unusual that the Rebbe Rashab would invite a Bocher to come. He was very affected. So he went in shaking, to the meeting with the Rebbe Rashab. And all of a sudden the Rebbe Rashab says, I hear that you passed very successfully the test in Yerodei. He said, now I want you to learn Ebenezer. And he said, I want you to take out Dayonis. And he sort of muttered, it takes quite a while. So where's what? So it'll take quite a while, but it's important for you that should be. I want you to have a day off. So he went away and months and months he worked on everything else, the whole day and night. He studied, and he got Pocky, and he spoke with Rabbonim, and he went to get Shimush, He got really into it. So all of a sudden, he told me that this time he gets a call from the Friedrich Rebbe, he calls it. So he goes in, and he said also the Friedrich Rebbe, when he was very serious with the Ponim, that was enough. So he walks in, he already starts shaking a bit from the look. So the Friedrich Rebbe says to him that there's come a shaila about an aguna. You know what an aguna is? A woman that she lost her husband, but they can't know for sure if he died or not, so she can't marry him. It's called an aguna. It's a big problem in halakha. There are a lot of showers and chuvas and miracles from tzaddik and other. Anyway, so he said, so what, So the Friedrich Rebbe said that the Tata, meaning the Rebbe Rashab, he wants that you should study the whole Indian, and he wants you to put in writing your Havzdah, your opinion. So he says, who am I? So I said, no. I say, it's an Indian, and you got, let's say, 2 or 3 weeks or whatever the Zman HaKotzer. I said, and at that time I want you to appear with him. So he worked on the whole day and night, and he took care of you, and he got into all the pratim, and he asked advice, and he learned, and he learned. So in the end, he starts writing down a few ideas, and he jots it down, and then he makes it like a chula, So he gets into he comes back to the Friedrich Rebbe at the time that he told him, and he gives the Friedrich Rebbe this written document. So the Friedrich Rebbe picks up his glasses and puts on his, very deliberately put on his glasses, and then he starts reading in front of him. He starts reading. So he's sitting there, he's tittering the whole time, and the whole time the Rebbe is reading line after line. The Friedrich Rebbe is reading this whole thing, much word for word. He's thinking to himself, what's the good, his koitza and his dati, what's it really worth? That can he can't. So after a while, the Friedrich Rebbe finishes, he reads right to the last line, then he puts it down, and it's quiet for a minute. He didn't say anything. He didn't say anything before. So there was a packet of cigarettes on the table. So all of a sudden, the Rebbe picks up the packet of cigarettes, and he pulls out a cigarette, sticking out of the packet. He goes like this to him. So he's completely shocked. There's a problem, he doesn't smoke. He didn't smoke cigarettes. So he didn't know what he should do. So he sort of hesitated for a minute. He hesitated for a minute. So all of a sudden the Rebbe looks at him and says, "What you got?" I said, "No, what's with you?" So he grabs the cigarette and he puts it in his pocket. And so the Rebbe says to him, "Can't scare. You can go." So he walks out. So later he hears that the Rebbe Rashab was very pleased with the children. The Rebbe Rashab liked the children. And he understood that they're offering him a cigarette. It was like, a chavivas and a haskoma to the Teichen children. Okay, sure. All right, so it goes through a short while, a few weeks. All of a sudden he gets another husband from the Rebbe Rashab. He has to appear in front of the Rebbe Rashab again. So he comes in, and the Rebbe Rashab says that there's a shtetl in some part of Russia, which is distant place. And he said they had the rov there, and the rabbonis is panui. So the Rebbe said, I would like very much that Munu Setor Rabbonis is also in unsere Inyan. That's what the Rebbe said. I would like it should be one of our people, the many between. So yeah, he's a Rabbonis in the far city, the whole thing. So he says to the Rebbe, he says, Rebbe, Yichom Moira. Yeah, I'm frightened. And what does he mean by Yichom Moira? Not that he's frightened of the city, or not he's frightened of the Russians or something. He's frightened of the Achrayas. He doesn't want to take that. Why doesn't he want to take that right? Well, the Shema, he knows the dinim. He can't take it. Shema hu lo yichaven lekavon amiti. Shema hu lo yichaven lekavon amiti is Shema זה לא יהיה 100% לפי רוצן העליין וכו' וכו'. That's what he said to the Rebbe Rashab. And the Rebbe knew very well what he meant. So he said, oh, some of the Rebbe Rashab smart, a big smart. He said, so he told me himself, he said that when you were in the presence of the Rebbe Rashab, it was oim, to was distracted. He said, if he smiled, if the Rebbe smiled, it was like the sun came out, like the clouds, It's like this amazing shemesh b'tzoraim, so lit up the room. So he said, the Rebbe smiled with a very broad smile. And the Rebbe looked at him and he said, was only den shiken einer was a hot nishkam moira? Yeah, in other words, he said to him, what am I supposed to do? Send somebody who's not afraid? You guys don't get the joke. But he does. In other words, am I supposed to send somebody who... So when he heard that, he told me, touche, finished. So he just looked at the Rebbe and he said, Ben Forek. So when am I leaving?
What's the shame of the cigarette? What happened with the cigarette?
I don't know. I must admit, I should have said to him, in which cupboard do you keep the cigarette?
It's not like the Rebbe's wine you can keep adding to, keep making another.
Anyway, is there a prat or was there a prat?
No, it's only a prat.
You see from that, that's the answer to Mendel's question. The answer to Mendel's question is if you're a Baal Mesilas Nefesh and you've been involved in tmimas that brings to that type of attitude. Yeah. So when you get into taking up rayas, then you're worried, Shema, atalum mechaven le'emes la'mitoy. Emes is everybody's got. Emes, everybody knows the pshat, he knows what, if you have to work hard to find out what's the pshat in the Tosfos, in the Beis Shmuel, or in the Chayim, what's the pshat. Could be there's a different opinions. Although some way or another you reach, that's him. Or Emes la'mitoy, that's a part. Emes la'mitoy, that's a part. The Babich went for Emes la'mitoy. It didn't go for him. He went for Emes la'mitoy. Amera Emes la'mitoy, that's a part. Shema hu lo yichave, Shema v'tanish treffen. Die Amitis Indian of Rotzen earlier. Never Israel, I'm afraid. So the Rebbe said, no, that's good. Who am I going to send if not somebody who's afraid? And so that's the influence. And that was what happened to all these people, they went around and they became Rabbonim and Shoftim and all. They were people like that. And maybe that set the line for what later broke Stalin and broke everything. And that was the Friedrich Rebbe's Yud Beis Tammuz. That broke the whole thing. So, come on. It took another 70 years for it to finish, but it was finished. It was finished. Ad Kedikach was finished. The day is the famous Sikha from the Rebbe Ezer. They helped the Friedrich Rebbe get out. They did everything to assist him to get out with his foreign, with everything. Everything. They helped him. However, that already indicated that they were bottled, Ela Kedusha. It just took a few years for the whole thing to dance out. Or when it did, nothing happened, just the whole thing collapsed. Just in one day it was finished. The whole communist Russia. A few days, over to it. That's an equivalent. My tiny Kinder, I realized that Lubavitch is always concerned with what is the Kavona mean.
What?
Kavona Amiti. And then it's not always popular. Because a lot of people say, well, the main thing is let's get moving, you know. Let's do things in a way that it'll be profitable, it'll be good, you know, we'll have this benefit. Oh, but the Kavona Amiti is something. They mean good. But the Kavona Amiti is another secret. The innocent purpose of everything is another story. But the father, the Stavki, the Lubavitch, the taught from Mashiach. The world is reached. I mean, look, we see it. If you just look, there's no other way on Mashiach. To see the ganze Indian, which is nowadays to save the world. I mean, the place. I mean, look what's happening over here. I don't have to tell you all the stories. Everybody knows, and it's all from the Yidden. It's not from the Arab. It's from the Yidden. In other words, from Wuz, I remember. I think I told you guys a story. I don't remember when, but I think I told you. I once heard from Rabbi. We're talking about one of the big personalities by the Messiah. He was a big priest, and he was very, just recently, in recent generation. And he was a big guy, a very Elohim. But, you know, he didn't sort of quite come out so good like every certain inyonim, you know. What's happening, I don't mean any good year, equated. And Rababa, and one Mashpia, Rababa said two things. He said, this is nicht gelernt, said das. He said, Bedrike, he didn't have a Rebbe. Mm-hmm. He said, when I will talk to a Rebbe, I'll take you on the Emerson. So he said, when he would have a Rebbe, he would have been a genuinely great man. This is only me in China. This is feeling good. You got to have a Rebbe, but not only have a Rebbe, you got to listen. You got to listen. You have to listen to what the Rebbe says. You have to go along. And the Rebbe tells us, Mashiach, it's the seal that the whole Bria is reaching Shleimusa. It's not just we're going to get out of the mess. We're moving to the Emerson Shleimus. Look in Perik Lamed. The Alter Rebbe says over there that the whole world was created Melchatchila. Once again, we're after the Emerson Kavana, we're after the ultimate. We're not looking to get potter from something or to get into a better situation where the Arabs won't chipper with us or to settle with our bank manager or something. We're not looking for that type of thing. We're looking for the Emerson Shleimus at a ganze Bria, and to see the Tachlis Hakol. Or the Rebbe says that now, if the Ebershter wanted Mashiach's Nevi, he's had it. That's what the Rebbe said. That's all been, all these inyonim have already been. Well, there's absolutely no thing holding back and preventing any more to this one. If the Ebershter have the Yidden have Mashiach's Nevi, they had it. If the Ebershter have the Yidden do tshuva, they've done it. Everything. All we're going to do now is be Makabel. That was the loss. Kabbalah's Pnei Mashiach. Take Mashiach into our life. Take it into your life. Yeah. Mati yourself. Yeah, with Mashiach. You wake up in the morning. Yeah, Mashiach. So you know the Mashiach. It's okay. But when you wake up in the morning, hack your mind into Mashiach. Yeah. And that's the day will will itself in a very special way. It'll be different. And I, Dafon Koyer, Dave should give me Koyer. Hashem will give Koyer. The Harvaya is written in the Parsha. Avram Zokei, Vol B'yomim. Hashem Beirach es Avrom Ba'Koyach. Where's that written anyway? Hashem Beirach es Avrom Ba'Koyach. Everything. Hashem, what's the pshat? Avrom Avinu wanted to bring the Zikna into the Yom. Shalom Aleichem. He wanted to, Mordechai, how are you doing now? I see you want to be oil into Pnimis Atik. Avamela, you need koyches, you need Hashem Beirach es Avrom Ba'Koyach. You name it, he's got it. Whatever is Klum, Choser, Klafi, Shmaya, anything he doesn't have. And the Ramban writes over there, Ba'Koyach is Filas HaYisod. Ramban was a great Mekubal. And the Ramban says that Ba'Koyach is Filas HaYisod. And Filas HaYisod is Pnimius, Kol Amshal is Mi Keser, through Das and through Tfilas. And Yisod, it all pours out. Gissa. So Avrom Avinu needs some prayer. He's already old, he's old, very highway, and he wants to bring it down into the Yomim. He needs prayer. Nadir. Beirach is Avrom Avinu. It just tells you how much, if you mean with a little bit of emes, what is what he calls it? Zemishtaper. Full stop. Listen to this, guys. We've got to know that that's what we're doing. But my man try to make every day chemists. Yes, sir. And even more than I remember I was once by the Rebbe said, as soon as possible. The Rebbe said it in English. And he said, and even sooner than is possible. Yeah. That's what the Rebbe understood English so beautifully. He said, as soon as possible, and sooner than possible. Because we're going to be as soon as possible, and sooner than possible. We're going to bring the Guru Shlema, and just try to live that way, try to make it a Mashiach day. And Hashem, you Beirach es Avrom Ba'Koyach. Hashem will give the koyach, and give everything we need, Be'ez Hashem. Everybody, probably says, he's talking there too much. Here,
Came back to Florida.
Please, it's important we should every now and then talk ourselves out. Have to talk a little bit to us out. That's right, to the Indian. The Rebbe wants Moshiach, it's Moshiach. That's it. Finished. It's got to be, it's got to come. And every moment that we waste is, a short, and he calls it's a lot. L'chaim, guys.
Chaim.